Talk to you about working with the Hart Foundation at SummerSlam, the first SummerSlam. I thought you guys stole the show.
Was that the one at Madison Square Gardens?
Yes.
Oh, I love those guys, man. I just hate that Jim passed away so early. I I've done a lot of stuff with Jim. I first met him in Mid South Wrestling, and then he went to Florida Championship Wrestling. I went there, and he ended up asking me to move in with him at his house. His wife went up to Canada, so his wife and two girls went up to Canada. So I stayed with Jim for 3-4 months, and we really had a great time. And then when we went into the WWF, when they were the house, and we were partners down in Florida. But then when we went up to Vince's territory, then he got together with Bret, and they were great workers together. Jim wasn't a guy that got down to the mat. He's just but with Bret being the technical worker and Jim being the stronger guy, great team to work with. And those were the best teams for us to work with, when they had one strong guy, one guy that was a little bit, weaker, but better worker, because then they could sell and the other guy could make the comeback on it. It was like a perfect fit for us. And yeah, we had a lot of fun with those guys and wrestled them many nights.
Were you surprised that Bret went on to such big heights in the WWF?
I wasn't surprised at all. Bret he was one of those guys that could work with anybody too, and he was the best for the match. If it was a big guy he went against, he sold like a son of a gun. If it was a guy his height, weight, everything, he worked like that. He was smart enough to know he went with the flow and did what was best for him. And that's what made the match. I mean, he could work with anybody. He could work with Andre the Giant. He could make Andre the Giant look like $1 million and make himself look like $1 million.
The match you had with the Harts at that SummerSlam stole the show.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to have good matches, especially Bret and Jim could carry his own too. I think that after a short period of time, the other teams wanted to work with us. One, they knew they were going to make a better payday. Two, they knew that we weren't going to try to gussle them up. We were going to try to have Barry and I always wanted to have the best match on the card that night. Now, sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't happen, but we still put out the same effort. Our objective was to do the best we could do that night and improve on it the next night.
Were you surprised with the success that Bret had?
No. Bret was a good tag team member and even better singles, I think.
Bret Hart.
Professional. And one of my biggest regrets in life was I was supposed to start when he left to go to WCW. About a week earlier, we were over in Abu Dhabi, and he invited me up to the Stu Hart dungeon to come fly up there and come train for a couple of days a week. And I just agreed to it, and the company was just starting to work out travel, and he left. And I was like, damn, I really wanted to go sit under that learning tree and just enhance technical skills. But one of the coolest guys, I walked up to him not too terribly long ago at a convention. So Bret Hart is one of the good guys in this business.
The Hart Foundation, without a doubt, was they were we had similar styles. They were good wrestlers. They had Neidhart, God bless his soul. As he was a powerful guy, but Bret was a very good wrestler, and we used to have good matches.
Were you surprised by the success Bret had?
No, I wasn't surprised. There was a time when they were going to put the belt on me. They were going to go. The WWF was going to go into Mexico, South America, Central America, Spain, and I beat the Undertaker in Spain. And they were building me up when I came back as El Matador, and all of a sudden they dropped South America, Central America, Mexico, and they went into Canada, and they chose Bret. I tell people, at that time, there were so many good workers. I don't care who you put the belt on. Everyone, whoever they chose, would have been a good choice. Vince McMahon was a pro at getting guys over, and it took Bret a while to get over, and that's when I came in as a commentator, and the houses were dropped for a long time, and when I come back as a commentator, the houses were up, and Bret was on fire. The whole Canadian thing was on fire. It was like the Canadians against the Americans, and then all of a sudden I hear that Bret's going to be leaving, and I just said to myself, it took all this time to get him over, and now they're going to take the belt away from him. I just couldn't understand, because I felt that he could have carried the belt for quite a while, and do good business.
And so one time Bret came like driving down the hill as we were in the ring. Then he just I guess he stayed in his car for a minute and just like watched us, and then watched us and then went into the house. And then I remember we went in the house a little bit later, and he was like, "Hey, I saw you guys." Kind of had some nice words for us. That was June of '96. That was, it honestly might have been the last day we were wrestling with Teddy's brother before he got sick, actually. And so then fast forward, so that was the end of June 1996. Teddy's brother passes away, like I said, in July 1996. And then in October 1996, we wrestle on a WWF live event at the Saddle Dome. And Bret hadn't fully come back to the company yet. I don't think he'd signed yet. I think he wasn't sure. And he came to that show, and he watched us, and I think he was very impressed. And I think he was like, "Oh wow, these guys really do love. There's something here. They're not just kids kind of screwing around." And that was when that's when he extended the invite to come train at his house. And so Teddy and I, we neither of us drove, but we would find a way to get there. We went pretty consistently for a while. And a lot of times it'd be just kind of Teddy and I wrestling by ourselves. But Bret would come in, and he would work with us, and I'll tell you how I really won him over. He's funny. He has a great memory. You might remember this. So same thing. We're training. We're in his ring. We're at his house. He's already kind of taken a liking to us. Obviously, you're not inviting someone into your house if you hate them generally. Sometimes maybe Canadian, maybe, but so he was talking about King of the Ring '93, and he mentioned about how he doesn't win any of the matches with the sharpshooter. And then he was talking about the psychology of it. And he's like, so I had them, he almost quizzed us. He's had him take out a body part. Do you remember what it was? And I remember Ted instantly, yes,
Man, right? Yeah.
Ted instantly said the knee. And Bret said no. And then I thought for a second, I was like, no, I remember Razor Ramon stomping his hand. Yeah. I remember he goes to the sharpshooter, Mr. Perfect. I said, no, your hand, your fingers. And he looked at me this is 1996, it's 3 years later. And I think he was like, well, this kid's not even in the family. How did he pick that up? I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure that was the moment that really won him over, is that I remember. And it's funny that you instantly knew. I know you've done your homework for sure.
No, I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. I remember too, it was either a second or third match before they even first locked up. Bret grabbed his hand and went, just for a second, just to plant that little seed, my hands hurt.
Which is funny because I didn't know it at the time, but it's something, it probably goes, and maybe even in plenty of times before that, but it obviously goes back to that, the match where he beats Flair for the title. He pulls his finger. So this is a funny storytelling that he is incredible at. Incredible.
So Bret has an actual ring. What do you have, a wrestling room in his house?
Bret, just like you, I think maybe, did they show it in Wrestling with Shadows? But he like in his pool room at that house, that's where the ring also was set up. So over time, I don't know if it was like the condensation from like the pool and the hot tub, but like the metal all started to kind of like those old rings. I don't know any. I mean, man, there was no give to that ring. That thing hurts so much. But we're wrestling in front of Bret, and we're 16, so you're invincible. So it didn't matter how hard that ring was, and no matter how hard it was softer than the dungeon. So.
Bret Hart.
I didn't get a lot of time to work with Bret, and I got the sense when I did that Bret was not happy. I didn't know whether Bret was always grumpy or he just was grumpy at this time because he wasn't happy with things. But I would see him and he would just look tired, and I would see him and he would just look melancholy. But he was always really cool to interview and was always cool to work with. And I was a great appreciator of his wrestling. I thought he was terrific. But I kind of felt like the way things were changing within the industry and within the company, he was not a fan of a lot of it. And when he left in the summer, then came back in the fall of 96, that there was a collective sigh of relief. Vince's expression, even though he knew at that point that Bret was coming back, but the sigh of relief from Vince at ringside was legitimate because none of us knew whether or not Bret was coming back. And thank God he was. And only to leave like a year later, because that was October of 96, and then November of 97, he was gone. So that was, and then during 97, they were working on that documentary. So when I interviewed him after he won the title from Taker at SummerSlam with Shawn as the referee, and so we now talk about him being a 5-time champion. And it was a long interview that was not for TV, but it was just for the movie crew. And so that was kind of cool. And then when we go to Montreal, nobody knew what was going to happen that day, but there was an air of, you could just feel it. There was some sort of tension in the air, but it wasn't really that different than what I had seen with Bret the whole time. He was just sort of there. And but so in the movie, the scene where Julie confronts Triple H and Shawn in the hallway, right, I am literally standing behind that camera because as soon as the finish went down, I'm sitting in the WWF.com room watching the show. And I main event's in the ring, so I don't have anything else to do on the show. And as soon as the finish happened, I went outside in the hallway. I was like, what the hell? And Jerry Lawler comes through and just rolls his eyes like, oh, and he gets his bag and he's going to leave. And then down this hallway to my left, see Vince hobbling. So that shit, because the movie camera was there already. And then I went closer to the camera because I wanted to see what was going on. And just heard that interview. You knew what was going to happen. You knew everything. And then apparently Vince got slugged. By that point, I was gone. So yeah, it was chaos, and nobody really knew kind of where things stood. And then I went back to Stamford the next day, and it was, and then we heard, the Road Warriors and Mick Foley left, and they're not going to be part of the taping because of what happened with Bret, blah, blah, blah. And they had to smooth that over. And then Vince came in that week and did the infamous interview where Bret screwed Bret. So everything wound up working out. And I was also, I always kind of say I'm sort of like the Forrest Gump of wrestling, is that I'm there, and I was there for so much, but I wasn't involved in it. Vince Russo worked right across the hall from me. And he was literally on the phone he was on mute, but he's listening as Bret and Vince are talking. And I had a magazine question, and I just poked in, he's, yeah, come on in. Bro, you have no idea. Vince is going over every possible scenario with Bret. this disqual. We could run this guy out, DQ. We could do this. And Bret is shooting every idea down. Like, oh man, good luck getting that in the ring. And that's exactly what happened. So a lot of what has been reported was absolutely true. What we didn't know was who made the decision when, who was clued in on it, who knew. And, you know, I never believed that Bret was party to it. Some people do believe that, you know, as conspiracy theory goes, that he was in on it, knew what was going on. I never got that sense, because so much of what was being said around that week was true, because I was hearing it. I was hearing from, as Vince Russo was on the phone, listening in, just taking notes. You know, yeah, it was a stressful week and a stressful time.
The Harts were a little hard to work with because of Jim Anvil, or the Neidhart. He was in his own little world. He was pretty hard to maneuver. You know, I remember he was definitely afraid of me hitting him in the mouth with the drop kick. And I told him, I said, Jim, come off the ropes and just put your hand up like that. I'll hit you right there. So he was so scared. We're in a match, and all of a sudden he comes off the ropes, and I jump up extra highs to give him a little loot so I can hit him good. And he turns his head so that my feet go by his head, miss him. And when we come down, the heel of my boot hits him right here, you know, and opens them up a little bit, you know. And he got up and he filled the ring with just fists left and right. And he hit me so hard in my right side, I thought he damaged my liver. So I'm screaming to Bret. I said, Bret, you better get in here. So, but he was just, you know, he was like a baby bull.
Any interactions with Bret Hart during these times? You talked to him about?
You know, Bret Hart, you know, I just posted a picture on my social media. I always say social media is like a second job, you know, so we gotta, you know, it's my diary to the world. So I just posted a picture with Bret Hart. Our connection is much more deeper than wrestling. Back when he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, you know, I have a family member, uncle, who's a very famous urologist. And what I did was I connected my uncle and Bret together, and Bret will tell you, if you ever talk to him or interview him, he'll tell you that out of all the doctors that he talked to, that my uncle, Dr. Charles Rosser, was the most informative and assured him that he would recover, and showed him which doctors that he should see to fight the prostate cancer. And Bret said out of all the doctors he talked to, my uncle was the most informative and assured him that he would be cured. So that's our connection. So I just saw Bret in Nashville for StarCast. New Japan was doing a show there, and we got so much love for one another. He's like, Fred, if you need anything, you know, you're one of the real ones. Just don't hesitate. Call me. You got my number. You got my wife's number, Steph. I said, yes, Bret, thank you. You know, anytime I need him to shout out, block the hate, you know, the shirt, you know, the movement, which is the most important, he doesn't hesitate. He's got my back. I got his back. So yeah, it's a lot of love outside of wrestling, you know. So that's what wrestling does to me, you know. It bridges, you know, it bridges relationships like that I truly love.
For your allies there, who did you go to for advice?
Interestingly, Bret Hart and Steve Austin were two that I would go to for a lot of advice. I don't know, sometime after I had left, I looked back and I realized almost every time Bret Hart gave me bad advice, or maybe advice that was geared toward a world champion like him, somebody that had been there 15 years already or whatever it was. Whereas Steve Austin would give me sensible advice, you know, according to my position in the company at that time. And I never listened to Steve because he was the new guy on the block. I always listened to Bret, and I always paid for it. And I think in some instances, Bret was winding me up and like sending me in there to do things I shouldn't have done, to talk to Vince and situations and stuff. I think he was winding me up too. And it took me like years after I had left to look back and realize, holy shit, maybe he didn't have my best interest at heart. So that's kind of how it worked. And like I said, man, I just became this guy that was, I was taking the painkillers, I was drinking a lot, I was the first one at the bar every night. It became that for me. So I was doomed, it was only a matter of time until it all came crashing down, and it eventually did. But yeah, those were the two guys that I would talk to mostly.
Can you give me any examples of advice Bret gave you that didn't go very well?
It's painful to talk about these, but like one instance, when I had the pay-per-view match with Triple H that was on the In Your House where they had me wearing that green outfit that I hated so much, but I couldn't wear any red or blue because, you had The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and you, God forbid you wear a color that they wore. But so I wore this fucking horrendous green suit. But yeah, that pay-per-view. And it was before that where we did the deal where he cut my hair off on TV and stuff. And that was the big angle. And I just remember telling Vince, as long as I get some revenge in the end, and the whole point was we were going to push me, somehow we were going to change gears with me and turn me heel. We got to like the night before, and I don't remember who the agent, I want to think it was either Jerry Briscoe or Lanza called me, and it was some weird, I was like at a dinner with Bret at a restaurant, and I think he was on the phone, back in the days of there was no cellular phones. So, you had the pay phones. That's what I was trying to say. And Bret goes, yeah, hey, so-and-so's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. So I went and got on the phone. And whoever the agent was told me the finish. They were just like, yeah, Triple H is, you're going to have a good match. And then Triple H is going to hit you with your own garbage can lid and pin you 1, 2, 3. And I was pissed. I was not happy about it. Anyway, so I start talking to Bret about it. And he goes, you need to talk to Vince. I go, you think so? He goes, yeah. He says, yeah, you need to talk to Vince. I go, well, I don't even know where to get in touch with him. He goes, I got his room number. Fucking guy. So he gives me Vince. I call Vince's room the next morning, first thing in the morning, and he's eating breakfast and whatever. Anyway, that phone call did not go well. And but yeah, that was one of those instances where Bret gave me some advice that was just not really good advice. And I think at the end of the conversation with Vince, he goes, just show up like you always do with a smile on your face and do your job. And at that point, I had nothing else to say because I had just signed a 1-year rollover. I had no bargaining position. I mean, I was Duke the Dumpster, opening to mid-card guy, and there was nothing else I could say. So I had to show up and do my job. But that was one of those instances. Huh?
How big was the smile on your face when you saw Vince?
The next day when I woke up,
yeah, exactly. Oh man,
he was walking in with Briscoe. I think I shook his hand. I go, "Hey, Vince."
Another thing I always want to ask a referee: what was your feelings on the Montreal screw job? I mean, my boss asked me to do something. I got to do it, whether I like it or not. He's paying my bills. I mean, that's how I feel about what the position Earl Hebner was put in.
Right.
What was your reaction to it? Did he say anything to the refs after? Please talk about that.
No, I mean, like, there was really Earl. I remember looking out hearing the bell, and I'm looking through the curtain, and Earl's running through the bomb, but there was tension going on. Bret had asked me to. Did they ask you to do anything fucking out of the ordinary? There was a lot of tension that day, but I really actually think Bret knew something was going on. I know that. But I didn't really think he knew. He thought maybe after it was all said and done, he probably didn't think they were really going to go ahead and pull this stunt, in Montreal or whatever. I mean, Bret at the time was with the company what, 15 years maybe, running hard with the company, making the money, and internationally in Germany, always selling out Germany. We were always in Germany, selling Europe out. But the company wanted to go a different way, and they wanted to go a different way. They wanted Shawn to be the face of the company, Triple H, China. They wanted this group to be the face of the company, and with some others. But I'm just glad I wasn't put in that situation, Mike. I felt bad for Earl, and I thought they would take care of Earl forever, but only so many years down the road, and he had it out with the company, I guess, and that was done. And I just felt bad. I always think, God damn, if that was me, man, holy shit, I would hate to be in that situation, because I was helping the family out too as well, man, paying my own bills, and you got to do what the boss says.
We are, I don't know, a long way road doing Raw. Remember, Raw was taped one week and live the other, So in the live show that night, we're gonna tape the next week. So remember, it was 4 hours. So I'm in the first hour against Bret. So I'm waiting for Bret. Bret not coming. I said, Bret always late, and that he always was late. And we are like, oh my God. So first hour gone. I'm like, okay, I have to wait to the other two. So of course I have to wait to the other two, because nothing can do. Bret arrived. So now we have the live. We did such a good match that we come back week after for live event. Everybody was congratulating. Hey man, good. I'm like, the heck, hey Bret, was it good? What happened? So somebody said, listen, ratings? I said, yes. Say, your match against Bret break the record ratings of that time. We went 8.2 or something like that. So that match went boom. So that told me right there that the people believe that Quan could be Bret Hart without doing nothing with him, without hey, they did a good story on Hakushi. Of course, coming from Japan, the gimmick he had, great wrestler, because he was good, solid guy. Love that guy. But something with Quan, like killing people here or there, to facing the champion that's by belt or whatever, a heel. Was possible, of course, but never done. So that match told me the people believe in Quan.
What can you tell me about your relationship with Bret? We haven't talked much about Bret yet. Growing up, were you guys close? Talk to me about what it was like to be the brother of the Hitman.
Well, I was 3 years younger than Bret, and we grew up. We got along pretty well. There's 8 boys in my family, so there's kind of a descending order from Smith, my eldest brother, to Owen, who's the youngest. But I hung out a lot with Bret, my brother Dean, who's 3 years older than Bret. So they were kind of my idols, and I did a lot of things with them. So some of it wasn't always around wrestling, but we did a lot of different things. But when Bret had finished high school and he'd done very well as an amateur, he had become provincial champion in Alberta. He was at a pivotal point in his career, and I don't think at that time he had thought about going into wrestling, but I think he realized maybe there was that opportunity. He'd initially gone into graphic arts, and he was thinking of maybe becoming like a movie director. And Bret was an incredible artist. I don't know if you've seen some of his drawings and cartoon sketches, but he had thought about going in that direction. And then this was, when my dad's promotion had really gone down, and there it was a tough time for our family and our promotion, because we'd lost a lot of money, and it didn't look like there was going to be opportunities for our family with Stampede Wrestling, because my dad was just losing so much money. But Bret started training with these 2 Japanese guys, Mr. Hito and Mr. Sakurada, who had been established stars for my dad, and really good workers, really good trainers. They had both trained in the dojos in Japan, and had been sumo wrestlers as well, and just had an incredible work ethic. And my dad asked them to teach Bret because he was so busy, you know, running the promotion, and they were working out with him 3-4 days a week in the dungeon, usually before and after some of the road trips. And Bret just seemed to be a natural. He was just picking up what they were teaching him, and you know, and it was very hard, regimented work. But you know, he just seemed to be a natural, and then he broke in a few months later, and you know, I think it was one of those situations where somebody else was injured and Bret was kind of thrown in that position, you know, and put in the ring and had some really good matches. And right away, you know, we knew he had that potential. You know, with a few of the heels that were working with him just said, you know, he's a natural. He listens well. He's got really good timing. Knows what he's doing. So I was just very proud of Bret. You know, because if he hadn't gone into wrestling, I'm not sure if his fortunes would have worked out so well. You know, I think he would have done all right. But you know, wrestling is where he really succeeded. You know, it gave him a great lifestyle, and he was able to prove himself. You know, it was not easy. Being a son of Stu, there was a lot of expectations and doubts, you know, about how he could perform, because there are a lot of promoters whose kids had broken into wrestling and they weren't very good workers, you know, and I won't single them out or identify them. Bret was really an exception to that. You know, he was, you know, he had my dad's passion and inspiration and his support, but he also just learned well from so many guys he worked with. You know, he learned well from Leo Burke. He learned well from Dynamite Kid. He learned well from Hito and Sakurado, who you'd go on to have some great matches with. So I was just very proud of Bret, you know, and then his you know, his career just took off from there. And you know, the true indication to me that he was proven stars, that he did well in other promotions. You know, he'd work in Amarillo, Texas. He worked in Puerto Rico. He worked in New Zealand. He worked in Germany. He worked in the UK. He did numerous tours of Japan, and you know, paid his dues and did so well. And I think the second test for Bret, you know, in his career is when my dad closed down in 1984. It was make or break time for Bret, because there was so much competition in the WWF at that time. And initially, he floundered there. They weren't doing very much with him as a babyface. And at one point, he was pretty serious about just quitting and giving up, you know. And you know, and then when they came up with this idea of turning him heel and pairing him up with Jim Neidhart to work with the Bulldogs, who they had just brought in, you know, it just showed Bret could be very adaptable. And you know, he had worked babyface pretty much his whole career, other than, you know, working in Japan as a heel. But and this was a big test for him, and he had to step up to that role, you know. And that's where his rapport, I guess, and his history with Dynamite and Davey really worked out, because they had grown up in the Stampede promotion and had so many matches against each other there and in Japan. They just set the WWF on fire, you know. And but Bret really was a catalyst there, you know, and it jump started his career. And you know, and then he went on to have tremendous success. And you know, and then years later made the transition from tag team wrestling to singles, you know, and filled that void, I guess, after Hulkamania and Ultimate Warrior and the Macho Man had basically had their runs there. And you know, Bret now was put in that position, first winning the Intercontinental title and then the World Heavyweight title. And you know, and I think proved himself, you know, and he was just a great technician in the ring, and had you know, consistently good matches with everybody he worked with. And it was great to see that he had an opportunity to work with Owen. You know, it was such a novel concept of brother against brother rivalry, and it was great. It kind of jump started Owen's career at that time, and gave him a whole new role, you know, as Bret's jealous younger brother and sibling rival, you know. And they went on to have some incredible matches, and it was great for both of them.
Yeah, my buddy Tommy Fierro runs 80s Con, and earlier in the month he had a convention and Bret was the headliner. Bret had a line. And when I say a line, I mean around the building for the entire 4 hours of the convention. Then Bret stayed an extra 2 hours just to sign the autographs for the people. And I'd say every third person, they weren't just there, hey, Bret, can you sign this? They were crying. Like it was, I've never seen anything like that. My buddy runs a lot of conventions. He has a lot of big names, but like there's such an emotional, real connection with your brother. Like I'm telling you, every third person when they met Bret was crying. It was unbelievable. I never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I heard too, Michael, from other sources too, that there were longer lineups to see him than any other wrestler, and they had some very big names there as well. But that's just a testimony to Bret's appeal, I think, with fans. And he's always been someone who appreciated fans and their support, all the fan letters they sent to him, and how they supported him through the good and the bad times, with the WWF, and even with the Montreal screw job, and then going to WCW, and then his career unfortunately ending there after the concussions he suffered. But the proof is in these fan sessions and WrestleComs where he goes, and he constantly draws hundreds and hundreds of people, who want to get an autograph picture with him or share some memories with him. And I think that's very inspirational to him, that he's still very well thought of by a lot of those fans, and he's never outgrown them. Even though he had his role over 20 years ago, and he's still very much remembered, and loved by fans. And it's interesting. It doesn't matter whether it's the US or Canada or UK or Germany, and he doesn't travel that much far, but he occasionally does some overseas tours in Europe, and he still has incredible fans, who come out to see him at these sessions and talk about how much they love their match, loved his matches, and that's pretty gratifying to him.
Yeah. I almost forgot to ask you about the Hart Foundation.
Oh, Jim and Bret. Oh, yeah. Great, man. Bret was just a great natural baby face. Jim was like a bull, So, but it was so funny when I did that gimmick with them there in WrestleMania. They wanted to turn Nikolai babyface. Of course, they needed more time for Warrior and Hulk and stuff. So we was going to be doing a quick match and stuff. And Jim picked me up to do so Bret could do the finish. And he picked me up, and Bret's milking the crowd, you know how he would do the thing walking around and all that stuff. And I start slipping. Jim says, "Bret, hurry up." He's screaming. He goes, he's heavy. I'm going to lose him. And he's screaming. And I'm laughing. I'm glad the camera didn't pick that up, because I was about to die. And then finally Bret hit the rope and came with the clothesline, So.
You still had your jacket on too. That probably couldn't get a good grip with the jacket on too.
Right. Yeah,
Maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that's
because
funny.
I was really, really heavy back then and stuff, plus I had oiled up and all that, and all that stuff. But Bret was milking the crowd and stuff, and Jim was, oh man, I'll never forget that. I was hilarious. So.
How'd you get along with Bret?
Awesome. Bret was. I got to work Bret a couple times, and I like the way Bret works, because he's sort of stiff like me. I like it to be in there. I don't throw nothing I won't take, So, yeah, I loved working with Bret, and just what an awesome guy. Yeah, he was the lone wolf though, but in Europe, me and Taker and Phineas had went out to this bar in Germany, and lo and behold, over in the corner by himself was old Bret. So we spent about 3 hours with Bret that night, us four, just hanging out in Germany. It was awesome. Nobody else was around, so it was good.